Hello, everyone. My name is Diego Saez Gil, and I am the co-founder of Pachama, a technology company focused on forest as a solution for carbon capture and climate change. I'm going to share with you a brief presentation to explain a little bit more about our work and the role of forest on carbon capture. So, Pachama is building a verified marketplace for forest carbon removal credits. And in one hand, we are building technologies harnessing satellite images, LiDAR data, and artificial intelligence to validate and monitor the carbon capture by projects that are either restoring or conserving the forest. And with that, we are providing higher assurance, transparency, and accountability on these projects. In the other side, we are building an online marketplace that allows for easy access to a wide variety of forest projects from around the world. And we try to make it very easy to support these projects with a lot of trust because you have access to all the information about the project. Now, why forest? Why did we decide to focus on forest as a solution for carbon capture? Well, it turns out that there are 2 billion hectares on the planet available for forest restoration and conservation that can remove up to 200 gigatons of carbon in the next 2 decades. In addition to all these opportunities for restoration of forest without competing with agriculture, forests have all these other co-benefits, such as protecting biodiversity and endangered species, supporting the livelihood of indigenous communities from around the world, and of course, providing other ecosystem services, such as water conservation and so forth. So now, what type of forest projects can receive carbon credit? Well, there are 3 types. Afforestation and reforestation is what is easy to imagine. We're planting trees, and then 40 years into the future, we have all this biomass that sinks carbon into the land. But we can also conserve forest, and to do that, we need to determine what is the likelihood of deforestation of this land, and then what happens if we maintain this forest standing, what is the carbon that is going to be captured as a result of that. And then finally, improve forest management. This is for forests in which timber harvesting is allowed, but the project commits to keep the trees growing farther, and for the delta between this additional carbon capture, they can receive carbon credits. Now, how do we use technology to validate this? Well, we are building 3 remote sensing models. In one hand, we are analyzing with a historical model what happened in the past. What is the deforestation rate on this area? Secondly, we are building a verification model that allows us to determine with a high degree of precision how much carbon is there today on this forest. And then finally, we are building a monitoring model that allows us to know in real time the changes on the biomass. Are people deforesting the area? Are they harvesting? Are there fires on the forest? And with that, we can keep the project developers accountable and make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on in these projects. So how do we use artificial intelligence? Well, we train deep learning algorithms combining field plots, carbon measurements with LiDAR scans taken by airplanes with satellite images of different sorts. And with these different data sources, the algorithms can train and then make predictions about how much carbon is there on a forest. We are working with an incredible group of technology companies that are making very strong steps towards supporting carbon capture projects. And we are made up of scientists, engineers, and founders who are very passionate about climate change and combining a lot of different skill sets to build this platform that we think are going to be very important to make sure that investments on forest carbon capture is done right. Our vision is that in the next decades, humanity derives enough funding to restore the forest that was lost, that not only can be a very meaningful source of carbon capture, but also a source of income, biodiversity protection, and just restoring the beauty of our planet, which we think that is what future generations deserve. So if you want to find out more about us, you can go to our website, pachama.com. You can email us to info@pachama. And of course, after this webinar, I'm going to be here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you so much for your attention.
Great. So thank you so much for the presentation, Diego. Do we have you on the line? Yes, here I am. Thank you, Alberto.
Perfect. Wonderful. So first question, thanks for sticking around, by the way. First question from the audience is, the rainforest conservation approach to issuing carbon credits for an estimate of the amount of forest prevented from being lost seems highly subjective. How is this actually done, and can it be manipulated?
Well, that is precisely what we are trying to address by bringing this very objective way of measuring the actual carbon storage, the actual difference between the baseline of business as usual on a given region and what the project can produce. And we think that today with the great data that we count, coming from satellites, from LiDAR, from drones, that can be achieved. And doing that, we think that biomass can be measured, and therefore these systems, these frameworks can be a lot more precise than in the past.
Great. Wonderful. So the next question is, who are your main competitors? How do you differentiate from them? Are you aware of any?
Well, there are many organizations that have been working on developing forest carbon projects. We don't see them as competitors, we see them as partners. To those who have been developing forest carbon projects, we hope to provide our measurement and monitoring tools so that they can also improve the data and the transparency on the projects. There are other startups working on using remote sensing to measure forest. And we think that's great. There's a lot of different approaches to remote sensing that need to be experimented. And then finally, there are other startups focusing on building marketplaces for carbon offsets and carbon removals. And so we haven't seen anybody that is combining, the things that we're doing, the same that we're doing. But definitely we see a lot of action on nature-based solutions and a lot of interest from the market.
Great. And the last question to wrap up the day is if you can elaborate a bit on how you access land for reforestation.
On how do we, can you repeat the question, sorry?
Yes, how can you access land for reforestation?
How do we access land for the deforestation?
Yeah.
So the project developers that participate in these markets, sometimes they are nonprofit organizations that own land, like the Nature Conservancy, for example. Sometimes we are talking about private landowners that are changing the use of the land. Sometimes it's indigenous communities, sometimes it's governments as well. We think that with the data that we are producing in the future, we can have a data-driven approach to land purchase for the purpose of restoring or conserving forest, and using that as a source of carbon capture. And so yeah, there is, as I said on the presentation, 1 billion hectares available for restoration, and it's just about knowing where to go for that land.
Great. Wonderful. So, overall, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for sticking around. And I'm going to hand it back to my colleague Payal to